As I mentioned when we started, today is the first Sunday of Epiphany. This is the season you all celebrate with decorations, cakes. No? You didn't have a celebration of the three kings and the little baby Jesus and the cake yesterday? No. Your lives are so impoverished. Epiphany is my favorite season of the Christian year, and after 34 years of marriage, Eric had the audacity yesterday to say, "Remind me what Epiphany's all about?" I said, it comes the 12 days after Christmas. You all know the 12 days of Christmas. They actually start with Christmas Day. They're not before Christmas. And then the 6th of January is Epiphany Day, when we remember the three wise men who traveled toward the Christ. And Epiphany is the season when we too find ourselves journeying toward the Christ and learning for ourselves what it means to follow Jesus. And we are seeking the light in the darkness of our lives. 25 years ago next week, I was ordained during Epiphany. I was thinking about having a gathering and an anniversary party of that, and I was talking with my daughter, who was 8 at the time, I think, and she said, "Mom, I'm looking at the chancel of your ordination, and everyone but you is dead now." What? And then I went through and I said, "Oh yeah. So I won't be having that party, at least here." At any rate, Carnival began yesterday in New Orleans. It lasts for the whole season of Epiphany. Epiphany spans between Christmas and Lent. So now you know, on Epiphany Day, you bake a cake with a coin or a plastic baby Jesus inside, and the person who gets that in their piece of cake gets crowned for Epiphany, and then they bake the cake the next year. We did that for a few years here. How many of you found the baby Jesus? I know Galen. Mark did. Paul did. Several of you got to wear the paper crown for the season. Okay, so in this room on Christmas Eve morning, we had a full house. We sang lots of Christmas carols. We celebrated communion. We lit candles, and we gathered in pews and around the sanctuary. We sang Silent Night. And then we ended with Joy to the World before we went out to celebrate the holy days with our families. You know, several years in a row now, we've just ended that service with Silent Night. But this year, I was drawn to the idea of an uplifting and joyous end to that very special candlelight moment. There was much lament in 2017. From our personal sorrows to our community tragedies, to our national and international issues, especially with the threat of an ongoing war in the Middle East and the idea that we might have a nuclear war with North Korea, I needed to sing Joy to the World. Now, don't get me wrong, my spirit wanted to stay in the quiet beauty of Silent Night. But I needed to believe that there was some reason for hope, some reason to celebrate and joy to the world seemed like the right one. Perhaps your own thoughts at Christmas were in need of more joy and hope. Wintertime is a desolate, haunting time of death. The trees themselves stand naked and cold in our midst. There are no green buds, no beautiful foliage, not even the yellow and orange and red leaves of fall, just stark, plain sticks, branches, and brown all over. But I'm here to tell you there is holiness in desolation. Think about the holy places and times in your own life. The Wailing Wall in Israel is known as a place of prayer and contemplation. It's a part of the ruin, though, of Solomon's temple. People from all over the globe go there to pray. It's a holy site for Judaism, for Christians and others. We find this ruin to have power. It's holiness in desolation. Walk through a cemetery anywhere in the world, and you will find sacred power. People are kneeling and remembering their loved ones. There's a quiet peace in cemeteries, places where there are bared souls and love poured out. It's there you will find holiness in desolation. When have you felt the closest to God? Was it in the deep and dark time of your life? After the loss of someone you loved, or the loss of a job, or the loss of a marriage? Was it in a desolate part of your life? Because holy times are often our most desolate. The Book of Lamentations is a collection of 5 depressing dirges. Don't you want to go home and read that? They're all occasioned by the leveling of Jerusalem in 587 BCE, and there is a reason to believe that the Hebrew people actually sang these dirges, these songs, at the ruins of Solomon's temple, magnificent even in ruin. So listen to their words, this dirge of desolation that is printed in your bulletin. How the Lord in his anger has humiliated his daughter Zion. He has thrown down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not redeemed his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord has become like an enemy. He has destroyed Israel. He has destroyed all its palaces, laid in ruins its stronghold, and multiplied in daughter Judah mourning and lamentation. The elders of daughter Zion sit on the ground in silence. They have thrown dust on their heads and put on sackcloth. The young girls of Jerusalem have bowed their heads to the ground. Robert Price wrote in the Fourth R, which is a magazine that's published by Westart Institute. That's the founding organization, also known as the Jesus Seminar, that there is a paradoxical holiness in ruination. A paradoxical holiness in ruination. Each Sunday in Epiphany, I want to base the sermon from one of these scholarly groups from the magazine, The Fourth R. As you might guess, The Fourth R is a play on the sayings about the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. And the 4th R is, anybody guess? Religion, specifically religious literacy. So each week during Epiphany, I'm going to bring you some of the most recent scholarship about a facet of progressive religion. And these topics include, not all of them are ruination topics, the fall of God as opposed to the supposed fall of humanity that you've heard about. Did you know that God fell as well? That's next week. And then the following week, death and salvation from a progressive point of view. Another one is God even real? And another, an atheist's 10 suggestions, as opposed to Christian 10 commandments. I'm calling this sermon series Shining a New Light, and I urge you to invite people you know who are anxious to hear a new kind of religious voice and scholarship in the world. Okay, so now back to that wonderful, provocative idea of joy in desolation. I can see the joy on your face. If you remember physics class, you may know the term antimatter. You remember that from physics? Oh, some of you do. Good. I didn't. I didn't like physics. It's the particle and the antiparticle. A positron appears for a split instance and then it decays. But leaving it is a charged hole where it was. So in religious terms, if you apply this physics principle, you can make a similar statement. When human strength decays after a brief moment of visibility, it leaves behind a void where the power of God is radiated. That's what Robert Price says in the fourth R. So let me ask you, what gives you joy? Most of us would probably say our families. Okay, they give us desolation too, but sometimes joy. Some might say what gives us joy are toys. Even adults have toys, cars, houses, a small object, a small aircraft, a piece of jewelry, our hobbies. And then we also find joy in our relationships. They can bring a lot of joy, but the truth is most of us don't get to be with our family every single day, and we don't get to use our toys all the time. Those things that bring a smile to our face aren't permanent. Those moments of joy don't just fill us 24/7. But what about the kind of joy that lasts day in and day out? What brings you that kind of joy? The Bible speaks to this in 2 Corinthians, better known as 2 Corinthians, 4:8-11. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. That was not scripted. Okay, so this is our second text for the day. In it, the Apostle Paul writes, "We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For while we live, we are always being given up for death, for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be visible in our mortal flesh." Pastor Adam Hamilton, who is my daughter's minister, says this. He says, "The worst thing is not the last thing." I liked that. After being in 30 plus years of ministry, I can affirm this is true. Some of you may have experienced the worst thing. It's hard to imagine anything worse than losing your child. Others of you have endured a serious, debilitating, or life-ending diagnosis. That's one of the worst things. There are those among us who have been arrested and even convicted of serious crimes. That is a terrible, life-altering thing. But the worst thing is not the last thing. It may feel like it may look like it, and I'm not saying that when we're going through the worst things that it doesn't look completely hopeless. It may take years, but you will smile again. It may take emotional strength you didn't know you had, but you will laugh again. It may require years and years of time, but you will find joy again. So I read with interest the story in Thursday's Wichita Eagle about Hoda Kopp, the new co-anchor on Today. She replaces Matt Lauer, who's going through one of the worst things. In 1986, though, Hoda was going through one of the worst things. She was driving around southeastern part of the country, sleeping in her mother's car and leaving station after station with rejection letters. 27 personal rejections. Her mom called and needed the car back, so Hoda had to go home without a job. She couldn't pay her bills. She finally got a job at a small television station in Greenville. She made $12,000 a year. Eventually, she was a traveling correspondent for Dateline. She still could not pay her bills. While she was there, her marriage crumbled. and ended, and she was diagnosed with cancer. She had a mastectomy and reconstructive surgery as well as post-treatment, and she credits her bout with cancer as the push she needed to talk to the officers at NBC to let her host a segment on the Today Show. And now she is anchoring their flagship morning show. Joy in desolation. This is one of the most puzzling yet hopeful things about the absence of God. In the midst of what seems like absence and hopelessness, there is presence and even joy. Martin Luther King Jr. said, God wrings good things from evil. Think about that. God wrings good things from evil. It isn't that God brings horrible things to us, but when they happen, God finds that little bit of good and wrings it out so that we might find hope again. We've just ended the 12 days of Christmas. It's that time when we recognize that God brings light into the darkness of our lives, into the bleakest of winters, into death and desolation, into doubt and worry, into heartache and hopelessness. God wrings something good. The worst thing isn't the last thing. For Jews, the destruction of Solomon's temple brought them a new holy place, a place to cry, a place to pray. The purported absence of God allows us to refocus our lives so that we can sing again, not just Silent Night in a candlelit room, but we can go out singing Joy to the World. Amen.